Shavua Tov and Erev Tov, everyone. Our turnout tonight, not just a increasingly filling up room in this space, but over 40 people who are here via Zoom as well, is a testament not just to the culture of Shoah memory that Rabbi Weiss established, and we strive to continue as a part of the mission and vision of our Bayit, of the synagogue, the Hebrew Institute of Riverdale. It's also a testament to the way we cherish and honor and revere our speaker, Lisa Baer, tonight. So many people in this room are friends and neighbors and admirers of hers, and the opportunity to hear a little bit more of your story is very special to us. We're marking Kristallnacht tonight, and this is a core feature of our shul's vision, that Shoah memory is not just marked on Yom HaShoah, but on the other occasions around the year and in certain ways every day of our lives, as we honor our survivors and continue to give them pride of place in our community, and as we focus our hearts on the second and third generations and on preserving the stories of that which took place. In recent years, it's become the practice to refer to Kristallnacht as Pogromnacht, a recognition that the night of broken glass doesn't do justice to what took place on that night. And it feels particularly haunting, painful to hear that word, Pogromnacht, in the wake of what took place in Amsterdam just a few nights ago. Pogromnacht was a night in which the low estimates put it at around 100, but others suggest many more Jews were killed. Over 1,400 synagogues were burned, and over 7,500 Jewish businesses were either destroyed or damaged. It was, for so many, the wake-up call. For some, it wasn't yet. For some, it had already been. The ways in which the days of the Jews of Europe were numbered. In our Bayit book club, we just read a book which told the story, amongst others, of Ben Hecht, a filmmaker, journalist, and author who wrote early in 1938 a short story called A Little Candle, which was a fictional account of an international pogrom against the Jewish communities around the world. And he wrote, in describing that in this short story, "We went to bed on the borrowed pillow of civilization and awoke in the dark ages." That describes Kristallnacht, Pogromnacht. It describes October 7th. It describes what we bore witness to in Amsterdam just a few nights ago. And so we gather to remember and to hear the stories, to honor our survivors, and to hold those stories as our commitment to make never again a reality. Tonight's Kristallnacht program is sponsored by Charlie Solomon and family in memory of Dr. Joan Long Solomon, cherished member of our Bayit, who really dedicated so much of her research and her heart and soul to Holocaust memory, to building bridges into the future, returning to Germany to build relationships and ensure a better vision forward. I'm grateful that Charlie is here tonight as we remember and honor Joan, and thank your family for making this program possible. I'm going to introduce Lisa in a moment, but first light a candle and ask you to rise for the memorial prayer, the El Malei Rachamim, for the victims of the Shoah.
I don't want my face. How do I get my face off? I don't want my face out.
El Malei Rachamim, Dayan Almanot V'Aviyatomim, Al Na Techeshev V'Titapak L'Dam Yisrael Shenishpach Kamayim, Hamtzei Menucha Nechona Al Kanfei Ashchina, B'Mahalot Kedoshim U'Tohorim Kezohar Harakia Me'irim U'Mazhirim, לנשמותיהם של רבבות אלפי ישראל, אנשים ונשים, ילדים וילדות, שנהרגו ושנשחטו ונשרפו ונחנקו ונקברו חיים, בארצות אשר נגעה בהן יד הצורר הגרמני וגירוריו. כולם קדושים וטהורים, ובהם גאונים וצדיקים עוזי הלבנון אדירי התורה. בגן עדן תהי מנוחתם. לכן בעל הרחמים יסתירם בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתם. אדוני הוא נחלתם, וינוחו ושלום על משכבם, ונאמר אמן. You can be seated. Lisa Baer was born in Frankfurt, Germany, and lived there until 1940 when she immigrated with her mother and two sisters to the United States. She settled in Washington Heights and lived there until she moved with her husband Manfred to Riverdale. She went to trade school and learned dressmaking and worked making custom-made clothes for a number of years. In our building, the Algiers, and many neighbors are here, amongst her distinctions, she sewed the first masks that we wore in COVID. Eventually, she worked for the Board of Jewish Education as an arts and crafts teacher, teaching in Hebrew schools as well as various yeshivot, a silversmith, a mother, a grandmother, great-grandmother. Her etrog liqueur is sought out far and wide, and we're cherished to have her as a member of our Bayit community. She's also a longtime member of the community of the Riverdale Jewish Center, and I bring blessings from the rabbinic team there as well. I guess the best way I can summarize Lisa is to say that she's who I think we all want to be when we grow up. And it's an honor and a privilege, Lisa, to have you share your story with us tonight.
Thank you, Rabbi. I'm flattered, to say the least. Which way you want it? Thank you. Okay, everybody can hear me? Okay. Little as I am, can all see me? That's good. I was born 1926 in Frankfurt, Germany. I'll save you all the arithmetic. I'm 97, and 4 weeks down the line, I'm going to be 98. And I feel privileged to be here, to have so many friends and acquaintances who came because I'm talking tonight. And especially my daughter who came, spent the day with me. So that was a special pleasure. I had a very nice early childhood till 1933. I was the youngest of three girls, somewhat spoiled. I had friends, I had parties, I went to school, I went to Orthodox yeshiva in the neighborhood, and I had a very normal, great life till January 1933, when Hitler came to power. And as far as I'm concerned, and as I see it, the Holocaust really began then, because Hitler absolutely wasted no time in putting out certain restrictions, whatever you want to call it, for the Jews. One of the first restrictions was that Jewish people could only work certain professions. My late father was a stockbroker, had been all his life, and he found himself very quickly without a job, which devastated him. He passed away exactly a year later, supposedly of a stroke. I guess he passed away of a broken heart, because it meant for him that he couldn't be a stockbroker, he couldn't do anything else, and that meant that he had no parnosa and really would have a hard time supporting the family. So in 1934, at the age of 7, I was semi-orphan, and my mother was struggling with 3 girls, trying to keep them going. And fortunately, my father's family had owned a little apartment house. I mean, there were obviously no skyscrapers at this time. It was a 5-story house. We lived on the first floor. The other floors were rented to other tenants, mostly Jewish. And with the income of the rent, my mom made it work that she could support us. And we continued going to school and did whatever we could, despite the fact that all kinds of things were happening all around us. Besides not letting people work at their profession, a Jewish doctor could only see Jewish patients. A Gentile doctor could not see a Jewish patient, so it was difficult. Needed a specialist or so on, or something like that. Was difficult to get the right doctor. The same goes for dentists. But with then one of the, I don't know, but that's the next thing that happened, doesn't matter. We couldn't have a telephone anymore. Now, life without a phone for everybody here is probably unimaginable, but you have to realize we talk about 1934, where not everybody had a phone, and communication was in person, by snail mail, what have you. But still, it meant one of our source of communications was cut off, because the newspaper obviously was all propaganda for Germany. So, and you didn't have a phone to talk to other people, so it was difficult to find out what's going on. Anyway, no more phone. Okay, but we said, all right, it's not so terrible. We live without a phone. It's not going to get worse. Somebody's going to kill Hitler, or it's going to go away. And we kind of put our heads into the sand and didn't take any action. One of the next things was we had a curfew. Jews had a curfew. By dark, we had to be home, which of course in wintertime was somewhat difficult. We couldn't, but a lot of stores had signs on already, Juden sind hier unerwünscht, Jews aren't welcome here, which meant we could only shop in certain stores. One of the major problems was that we couldn't have a radio anymore, because the Germans thought we would be able to manipulate, dial, get a foreign country. I mean, radios, again, at that time were somewhat primitive. You heard the local news or whatever. And to have a radio that transmitted to overseas was not that common, but a lot of Jews had it. It was, so anyway, you couldn't have a radio anymore, and you certainly wouldn't dare have it on the sly that you could listen to foreign broadcasts. So we gave up the radio. And this went on and on. One of the next things which happened, probably 1936, something like that, they decided that Jews really couldn't own silver or any kind of jewelry other than a wedding band for the women, a watch, and that's all they could have as far as jewelry. As far as silver is concerned, what they could have was a set of eating utensils, knife, fork, and so on, one set for each person, and that was it. The rest of it would be given over to the country, and that's all. My mother had some lovely silver, and she was extremely attached to the things that she had, and she was devastated until she heard that, well, if you could turn in your silver, it would be appraised by a German, and if you could bring in that amount of money that it would be appraised for in foreign currency, you could give the silver to the police station. It would be sealed in a carton, a suitcase, or what have you. And when you leave the country, eventually you would get it back. It's Germany was still a relatively poor country following World War I, and they needed foreign currency the worst way. I mean, any way they could figure out on getting it, they did, and this was one way. And so my mother telegraphed to America, to the family, please send me $100. It was a lot of money also at the time to whatever, that I could keep the silver, or rather turn it over to them until the day that we leave the country, because by that time people finally woke up and realized, we got to get out of here. The family was not very enthusiastic about this suggestion, but they did it. And she got a receipt. She went to the police station, got a receipt for the suitcase, which was sealed. And yes, when you leave the country, you can pick it up and take it home. Another thing was that everybody had a passport. That was a sort of the thing in Germany. You had cash in the house and a passport, and I have my passport. But theoretically, it could have helped us to go somewhere else, maybe. But the passport was stamped with a J. I don't know if you can see the J. And which the minute you open it, it showed, hello, you're Jewish. And in addition to that, every Jewish woman had to take an additional name of Sarah to be nice and Jewish, and every man had to take the additional name of Isaac. And that was the official name on the passport. My passport is signed Lisa Sarah, and I only dropped the Sarah officially when I got my second papers, when I got to be a citizen of United States. So the passport wasn't that helpful, but anyway, it was one more thing that says you're a Jew, and that's it. And actually, people used to go to Switzerland for vacation, and that got to be difficult because a Jewish passport, and the Swiss were not exactly thrilled to have the Jews come in even for vacation. People did it though, and I know they wore before they had to turn over the jewelry, they wore their jewelry, and somehow they lost it in Switzerland, And some people got it back, some people didn't get it back, but that's how people got stuff out of the country. So life went on with more and more restrictions, and still we didn't wake up. We didn't just, some people were smart and left. They had mishpocha in different countries. There was family of my husband here in New York, and they said, get out of there, and if you don't get out, at least get the kids out of there. And my late husband did come to America in 1934, 35 to live with the American family, and he saw none. He was, of course, safe here, and that was it. Anyway, as life went on, and then came 1938, Kristallnacht, which we have tonight. It was something the Germans had organized before, because it's impossible to conceive about a whole country getting, with the synagogues being burned, the men being arrested, the stores as well as apartments being destroyed. The Germans had it all set up. It was in such a way that the minute anything happened, the signal went out, this is it. Because it was simultaneously all over Germany, the November 9th and November 10th, that the synagogues burned and houses were invaded and so on and so forth. I don't know if you all know the reason. A young Jewish man in France shot a German official because he was very upset that his Polish family would be deported. And so that the killing of that German, whatever, someone in the government, not a very high officer, set the whole thing off. And that set Kristallnacht off, which not only meant the destruction of much of the German Jewry, but it also, the Jews were fined 1 million mark. It was a lot of money. And everybody's bank account, it was just money was taken out, and whether probably it was more than 1 million, but anyway, that was the punishment we had. But of course, the punishment was much worse. Besides the burning of synagogues, they invaded the houses. I remember I was at the time, I was 12 years old, something like that. And I remember they broke down our entrance door, 3 burly guys with a big stick or bat, whatever, had smashed the glass on the front door. They walked into the apartment, and we had a little china closet, like a curio cabinet with all kinds of stuff in it, and they smashed the doors and looked in, and the first thing they saw was the Iron Cross that my father had gotten during World War I because he was a prisoner of war for a year, I understand. And he said, Jew can't have the Iron Cross, that's inappropriate. They took that and whatever other stuff they saw. But my mother, who was a lady a little bit taller than I am, had a lot of street smart, I mean, really street smart. She put her hand, had the nerve to put her hand on one of these guys' arms, and he was probably twice her size. And he said, listen, you can do in my apartment whatever you want. You can take anything you want, whatever you find you want. There wasn't obviously much silver jewelry around, but whatever other goodies you see, do not go upstairs, because my old parents live upstairs on the 2nd floor, and they will be petrified if you walk into the apartment. They don't know what's going on. Don't go up, please don't go up. And she begged him. And I remember literally physically hanging onto my mother's skirt, what's going to happen to her, you know, if she talks to the guy and he has a bat there and he doesn't, you know. But somewhere, I guess there was a little spark of decency in him that he said, okay. And they took a few touches. I don't even know, I don't remember what they took. He told his 2 other cronies, let's go, and they walked out of the house. My mom not only saved her parents, she saved everybody who lived in that house upstairs, because they didn't go up at all. You know, they didn't go to the 3rd, 4th floor. All right, being that we had no radio, we had no phone, obviously newspapers were useless, we really didn't know what happened. No idea what was going on, why did this happen? And later that, I guess it was already the next day, my cousin came by and she had a little more information, including that my uncle, her father, was taken to concentration camp. And we heard that all the Jewish men were taken to concentration camp, which at that time was concentration camp, was prison, but it was not a death camp yet at this point. But here there were hundreds, thousands of people. And what eventually happened, that they could get out either if they paid their way out with money, or if they had a visa to go to any foreign country that would accept them. So, but I guess everybody saw the light all of a sudden. They realized we got to get out. It was 1938. Enough of this. It's obviously not going to get better. Hitler is on the way. We have to get out. So there was a scramble to get a quota number to go to America, as well as try to get out to any other country. The quota numbers, again, it was all snail mail. You wrote to the to the consul who was in Stuttgart, and requested your quota number. And within probably 2 weeks, the numbers for the following 2 years were given out. And people who wrote a day later or the mail got stuck were stuck with a quota number 2 years down the line. But that's what it was. But you tried every which way to go wherever there was a possibility to go. Lots of people went to Cuba, to Central America, wherever they could get a visa for. Even though our number was very high, we got called to the consulate much earlier than we expected because people dropped out. England took quite a number of Jews. Of course, a lot of people went to Netherlands and Belgium at the time, which was apparently quite generous in letting refugees come in. Anyhow, we were called to Stuttgart, to the consulate, my mother and 3 girls. And we get there, and he looks us over, questions us, and then he says, well, you're all women, and the girls all, they still have to go to school or what have you. You can't make a living. You're going to be a ward of the state. And the only way that I will even consider giving you a visa, if in America they can put up $7,500 in your name only, just in your name, that you can use just because you're not going to be able to support this family, and then I will reconsider. There was, of course, no calling America. You couldn't do that. But we sent a telegram and explained to them, wrote letters, and they said, more or less, you're crazy. They were all refugees. Nobody had money. And my mom explained that this was our only chance to get out. And of course, by that time, America knew a little bit of what was going on. They had heard about Kristallnacht, about this terrible destruction of Jewish life, Jewish stores, everything. Anyhow, make this saga short, and they actually got the $7,500 together in my mother's name, and I do have the papers from the bank saying that she now has $7,500, which only she can withdraw, and blah blah blah. And I saw from papers that we had complete strangers contributed to that, to get that kind of money together. So now it was I guess half a year later, I don't know exactly the time span, that we went back to Stuttgart and presented this paper, and the consul really had no choice. We did what he said. We got the $7,500, and we got the visa to go to America. By the way, I have copies of just a few of the things that papers and affidavits, what we have. I have donated everything to the Museum of Jewish Heritage, but I did make a copy of some of the interesting stuff, and after the talk, I'll put it out. It's just copies. You're all welcome to look at it. And so anyway, now came the struggle. How do you get out of Germany? It was still before the war, obviously, but still you had to get through somewhere. And it wasn't people try to get out by a Russia, whatever, because then the war broke out, 1939. We were sitting there with our American visas and nowhere to get out. Netherlands and Belgium was already obviously under German jurisdiction, so was France, a good part of France. And the only way to get out was really either via Russia or to go to Lisbon, Germany, and Portugal, to Lisbon, Portugal. To Lisbon, which was sort of the only neutral place in all of Europe, and to go there and try to get steamship tickets for America. So with a lot of luck and a lot of finagling, we managed to get airplane tickets to go via Spain to Lisbon. Again, my mom was very, very resourceful, and I know there must have been some kind of Jewish organizations still working, because I know she used to go downtown into the city to arrange things, and they were helpful in helping her get out, in helping get the airplane tickets and the visa to go via Spain. You needed a visa, even though you just passed through literally for died. We finally managed to leave Frankfurt in November 1940. So we were there for a year of war. And that was difficult because there were rationing stamps, and the Jews did get rationing stamps, but like everything else, they were stamped with a J, which meant that you only could go to the designated stores. And the designated stores, generally speaking, didn't have the food you wanted or you needed. Meat was unheard of. But I don't remember ever being hungry. I do remember my mom being very resourceful in preparing food, but I don't know how she did it. Because one thing she did, as Jews, we were also entitled to meat, which obviously was non-kosher, which we didn't eat. But she hooked up with a bakery, I don't know how, that we would give them the meat, whatever meat we could get for our stamps, and they in turn would give us eggs or butter or sugar or flour, whatever they could give us. And so when we used to shop for the meat, whatever meat there was, and including cold cuts, and I remember I used to see those cold cuts and I was so jealous, you know. And but I was a designated person to go to the back door to that bakery to give them the package, and they in turn would give me the package with eggs or whatever it was. I had no idea that what I was doing was highly illegal and rather dangerous, but I was a kid. I was 12 years old. I looked innocent enough. It was still before the time that you had to wear a Jewish star. So I did it, I went, I knocked at the door, and they took the package and they gave me a package, and I went home, and lo and behold, there were goodies inside. My mother did a great amount of baking because that's what she got, flour, and she got eggs, and she baked bread, challah, cake, whatever. And as I said, I don't remember being hungry at any time, even though I'm sure the variety of food was very limited. And of course, we didn't see meat for many years, nor fish for that matter. So to go back to it, this was in November 1940, a year of war. We had our share of air raids, even though there were never any bombs, but we were in the air raid shelter, and we heard the anti-aircraft. But fortunately, no bombs were dropped in Frankfurt at that time. One reason is because England, and they were British planes, didn't have any, they weren't prepared for war. So while they could send the planes across the ocean, they couldn't drop any bombs. They didn't have any. And we were sitting in the shelter, which was the cellar downstairs, which was allocated the safest place, of course, were for the couple of non-Jewish families who lived in the house, and the not so safe theoretic place was given to us Jews, and we spent very often 3 or 4 nights or part of the nights in the shelter. And that was it. We had, of course, blackout curtains. My grandparents, who could not negotiate the steps, were excused from going to the shelter. It was amazing. They checked that it was nobody else was there in the apartment, and they were allowed to stay there during the air raids. we, depending on what time the era it was and how long it lasted, that's how our school arranged our day in school. We started school later, depending if it was 2 hours, it was an hour later. I don't remember the time schedule, but I do remember I was the only one of the 3 girls still going to school that I took full advantage of the maximum time that I could stay home and not go to school. But I do give on the other hand, I give them credit that they try to keep some kind of a school system going, to keep our education going, to keep us into some kind of a normal life. And I went to school. It was very interesting sometimes by this girl, oh, where was this girl was here yesterday? What's the matter with her today? Maybe she was sick. The next day she wasn't there. Oh, it turned out that they left the country. You did not talk about that you had the opportunity to leave, that you had a visa, that you had papers, that you had a ticket to anywhere. So I left my very good friend in Frankfurt. She and her family never got out, which was very, very sad. I often think about it today. So anyway, so it was, I got back to our trip. It was November and we were going via Spain to Portugal. The planes were little propeller planes at that time, and could certainly not make that flight all in one session. So we arrived in Barcelona in the evening. A Jewish family who we didn't know, they didn't know us. They picked us up, 4 people, took us to their house, fed us dinner, put us up to sleep, and put us back the next day to the airport. We have no idea who they were. Again, there was a network of Jewish aid around, apparently, and they were contacted by I don't know whom to pick up this family of 4 women and put them up for the night. We were allowed each to take 1 suitcase and 10 German mark, which was at that time $4. And before leaving, we went to the police to get the suitcase that we had deposited with our silver. It was sealed, and the only thing we were told we were not to open it until we crossed the border. So there was the question, what was in there? Our stuff, bricks, whatever. And when we crossed the border and my mom opened the suitcase, amazingly enough, everything was in there that we had. So anyway, so here we were with our belongings. We arrived in Lisbon, and again, there was a network of aid who saw to it that we had a place to stay, that we had food, because $4 didn't get you very far. And we were in Lisbon probably only 4 or 5 days, because there was competition of getting those steamship tickets. All the people who had gotten from Belgium to France to finally to Portugal, everybody wanted tickets with the American Steamship Company. Our family here in America deposited money with the Cunard line, it was. And because there was money there, we're a step ahead of everybody. They already had the money. All they had really to find a ship to put us on. So that's why our wait was very short. We came to America on a little boat called the Siboney, which used to transport bananas between New York and Cuba. and they had converted the hold of the bananas into dormitories, one for men, for women, so they could pack the boat really with a lot of people. But we were 4 people, and again, I guess my mother pulled some strings. I don't know. We were very lucky to get actually a stateroom on one of the decks, not on in the basement, and we crossed the ocean in luxury because we had our own room and our own bathroom, unheard of, and of course we had plenty of food there, and the crew was there was an American crew who was very nice to us kids, especially. I remember I knew next to no English, but there was one, I don't know what his job was on board, but he often looked for me and he said hello, and I was so happy that, somebody says hello to me. We crossed the ocean, which was mined, especially around Bermuda, which was British territory. And I still remember the pilot in a little rowboat coming toward our ship and going up the rope ladder to guide us around the island, because that was heavily mined, that we didn't blow up. And so we kind of, it took practically an extra day to go that way. We went around Bermuda, and then he left a day later, and I saw him go away with his little red boat. And we sailed north and to New York, and arrived in New York the 3rd of December, which I still celebrate to this day. It was a week before my 14th birthday. And we lived with an aunt, an uncle, and some cousins in a very nice apartment. But it was too many people. It just didn't work out. And so we moved out within about a week, because it just didn't work. I still had to go to school. My oldest sister, who was a dressmaker, found a job. My middle sister went as a nanny, as a sleep-in, so she didn't need a place to sleep. My mom found a job in a factory, and so we could afford to move out. In those days, the refugees who came to New York, and they were mostly settled in Washington Heights, many of them took bigger apartments because they wanted people as boarders or to share the apartment to keep their costs down. So we rented half of an apartment with another family. After all, we didn't have much in the line of belongings. We certainly had no furniture. And we lived in Washington Heights. And we bought a few items of furniture. Of course, we had to buy beds or something to sleep on. And we bought what was like a pull-out couch that was like a studio couch. And we bought this couch complete for $20 with bed bugs. That we didn't know until a long time later, because we weren't familiar with bed bugs, but we were all bitten up pretty badly. And somehow I was bitten up more than the others, or maybe I scratched a little more, I don't know. I went to the doctor and said, "What is all this itching?" So he laughed and he said, "Bed bugs, Well, with a heavy heart, we had to get rid of that couch, because there was no way, despite spraying and all the rest of it, there was just no way of, getting rid of it. So we got rid of it, and we finally got our own apartment in Washington Heights. It was very small. We 3 girls I was at the time, I just 14, turned almost 15, and 2 older sisters slept in one room, shared one closet. There was still space in the closet after we hung our clothes, believe it or not, one bathroom. And from there on, we all managed. My mom lived in that apartment till the day she died, really. And my sisters moved out as they married. I was the last one to get married. And that's how we made it. So As I said, I brought some papers which I'll put on the table. I'm open to questions, whatever the questions are, I'll try to answer it as well as I can. Yeah.
I'd
Thank
like
you.
to ask a question. Helen, can I ask a question? No. They hear me or not?
Yeah.
Can I,
What were you saying?
I would like to ask a question.
Anytime when you were frightened. I was frightened, very frightened on Kristallnacht. I was very frightened because I thought these burly guys, and because my father had died and I had no brothers, I also wasn't used to men around the house, So that was probably also in retrospect that I guess I was frightened by these big guys. I was frightened then. I was frightened when I arrived to America and my uncle picked us up at the boat and said, we're going to take a taxi to go home. And he explained the taxi was going under the water, the Holland Tunnel. And I was sure after all this, I'm going to drown now. I'm going to be underwater. I was frightened. I remember that very, very clearly, that I couldn't fathom. How could I go underwater in a car, So, and I guess a lot of things like the air raid you got kind of used to. And again, when you're young, you don't frighten quite that easily. You're much more positive. So I guess I was frightened of when my mom went out in the city trying to arrange things, and she said, I'll be back at 4 o'clock. She wasn't back at 4 o'clock. I used to stand at the corner window where I could overlook the streets, how she would arrive. And she wasn't here at 4 o'clock. At 4:01, I started to cry until she walked into the house. And she was, both my sisters and she, they tried to, reason with me, but I was beyond reason. And the minute she walked into the house, I went to the bathroom, washed my face, hoping she wouldn't see that I cried. And so I was frightened. I was very frightened that she wouldn't come back. Yes, and some of this, as my daughter will know, some of this being scared that something could happen is still with me. So once in a while, I go looking for my children of communicating, and I put an SOS in and I said, you okay? Where are you? So I still, that particular fear that something could happen to someone in my family, that stayed with me all my life. But otherwise, I adjusted to America. I worked. I have a family, kids, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and so Hitler didn't do what he tried to do, that's for sure.
May I ask just one more question?
Sure.
You spoke about a time when you were in Germany, when things were already starting to happen,
Right.
but you were like oblivious a bit to it, or you pretended. Do you think things are like that now, where Jewish people are thinking they're more secure than they really are?
I'm afraid they think that they're safer than they are. Yes, I mean, sometimes I hear something happening in Borough Park or whatever. I said, oh, this is deja vu. That's, I've heard of that kind of thing before. When we girls walked on the street, we were not physically attacked, but I remember walking past a public school on my way to school, and the kids would stand at the gate and would call us dirty Jew and would spit at us. the boys were often physically attacked and beaten up, and the law was you cannot defend yourself. So the Jewish boys had to, came home with bloody noses more than once because they couldn't fight back, even if they physically were able to. So when I went back to Germany at 1995, and I was invited, I was offered to speak to the school children there about my life, what have you. I did, and I picked that particular school, even though those kids were not guilty of anything anymore. But anyway, that I did speak to them in those days. My German was still a little bit better, and I did, talk about my life now and what happened and so on and so forth. So I was active there, and as I said, now I'm active with the Museum of Jewish Heritage, and I speak to groups of children, I speak to adults, I speak on Zoom or I speak in person, depending what their demand is. I've spoken on Zoom to teachers in Germany who are involved in some kind of a special school, and I've spoken to them 2 years in a row. That, sort of what my life was like. And this year, we were invited, all those who spoke, who were willing to speak, were invited to some kind of a Zoom conference where the teachers showed how they brought it to the classroom. And they showed how the kids developed it either in painting or in some other way. And unfortunately, I didn't get a copy of the group that developed my story, did it in caricatures that they saw a woman with 3 little kids walking along. That's about the only snippet of the film that I saw. But I was happy to see that, they brought it back to the kids, the story. And the illustrator illustrated my story, and that I sort of have. So it makes an impact to hear somebody speak and tell the story. And when I speak to kids, depending how old they are, if they're for Jewish kids or non-Jewish kids, they ask questions, or the teachers ask questions to get the kids a little bit more involved. So any other comments, questions? Yeah.
I just want to comment on the resilience that your mother had.
Amazing. She was amazing.
That could have made a difference if
Oh,
she didn't have that. And her and being without her husband, your father dying,
She was 42 years old when he died, and she was faced with life. She was an amazing. She grew up on the farm. My grandparents had a farm, and her education was, pretty basic. But she was so street smart, and she had so much guts and so much courage. And even when she came to this country, she worked, and she was happy, and she played bridge whenever she could. She accepted life, as it came along, and she made the best of it. She was an amazing woman. As I got old, I realized how amazing she really was. Unfortunately, she died very young. Now is very young. She died at 64, which is young now. At this time, it wasn't that young. But she did see all her grandchildren still there. So obviously, great-grandchildren. I mean, that was a term we didn't know. We hardly knew our grandparents. Great-grandparents is a term that maybe we learned, but we didn't know what was a great-grandparent. So,
Lisa, a couple of things. When this whole thing started, how did the authorities in town know who was Jewish and who wasn't?
Oh, the Germans kept such wonderful records. They knew exactly who was Jewish, how old you were, and what have you. No problem.
Number two, the night of the afternoon of the 10th, that was Kristallnacht.
Yes.
What do you remember about stepping outside and what you saw?
We didn't go outside. We didn't, they broke in, it was late afternoon, and we passed the night not knowing exactly what was going on. The next morning when I wanted to go to school and I walked out of the house, I looked out the window, I don't remember which, and I saw smoke galore, which was, I didn't know where the smoke came from. And so I stayed home, obviously stayed home from school. It was only afterwards that my cousin came and said the smoke was from the synagogues burning. And the Germans did not attempt to put out the fire. They just sprayed all the houses all around, that no house of theirs would catch fire, but the synagogues burned to the ground, obviously, or whatever stone. I mean, the stone skeletons remained and were taken down eventually. But there was obviously no attempt to put out the fires. So, yeah,
Someone on Zoom wants to know about your grandparents that lived upstairs.
yes.
You know what happened to them? Did they also
Yes,
escape?
yes. My mother arranged for a woman to come and live with them, a woman who was physically handicapped somewhat, who would never get a visa to go anywhere. And she lived with them. I know they both died at home because we got telegrams when they passed away, 1941, 1942. And when I went back to Germany in 95 and I went to the cemetery, I was amazed to see that they were obviously buried and had a proper, but say the engraving, there was some mistakes of the date, but it doesn't matter. So there was some community, some kind of organization, whatever, who saw to it that the people who died normally in their home were buried and had a gravestone set. And I have, at the time I was young and ignorant and innocent, never asked the right questions of how did this happen. But the stones were there with a proper date of when they died in 41 and 42, when they died in their own apartment. I know that. So, yeah.
You might have said already, but how large was the Jewish community, when
I-
you were living
I'm
in-
sorry?
How large was the Jewish community of Frankfurt?
Large. It was a lot. I don't know how large in numbers, but it was known as a large community of Jews, mostly Orthodox, I believe. And it was a very prominent community, well known, and produced some fairly well-known figures in writing and what have you. So.
Were there a lot of families like yours that were able to leave around when you did?
I actually only know of one family who left after we did. I mean, we sort of were the last of the Mohegans, so, and in 1941, the deportations began from the big cities, where they had already been from the smaller towns. They had already deported people, but the big cities were only really hit like in 1941, beginning 1941, that people were deported.
Let's take a last round. So I just want to see who would still like to speak or ask a question. 1, 2, David 3, Barbara 4, Hanan 5, and Esther 6. Great. Go ahead.
I'll make it brief, okay.
My question is, when you got to America, did you ever consider not telling people that you were Jewish, or not telling your children or grandchildren?
No, no. I was fully aware that I was welcome here as a Jew, and it never even occurred to me to deny my Jewishness. So,
Never afraid of what that
no,
would do to
no,
your grandchildren?
no, not at all. Not at all.
Can you share just a little bit about the school in Frankfurt? It sounds like it was a Jewish school.
I started out in the Jewish school, which was elementary, and went all the way through high school. with Kristallnacht, it was burned down just like the synagogue. And the school I attended then was the other Jewish school in Frankfurt, which was not, which was Jewish school, but not Orthodox. It was, I guess, I don't know what you would call it, Reform, conservative, or whatever, which was not touched because it was not burned down because it was right next to the offices of IG Farben, which was a big German chemical company. And they were afraid if they would burn the school, the offices would burn too. So that school was left perfectly intact. And that's where we went to school, which was a big walk from home because we were not allowed to go through the park. We had to go on the street, which made it a little further. But there was some kind of a school system. And as an aside, when I came to America knowing next to no English, I was pretty good in math, and math is universal. And when it came to the math session and I knew all the answers, they realized I was not an idiot. And you know, that I was, you know, and I learned English very quickly. It's sink or swim, and you better learn how to swim real fast. So I did learn English.
Yeah, so first of all, I want to thank you very much for sharing this amazing story with us in this personal way.
Thank you
My
for
question
listening.
Is this story, has it been transcribed? I know it's recorded tonight. Has it been transcribed? Has it been written? Has it been published? Because it's a story that everybody needs to know.
I've told this story many times. I have actually made a tape for the Spielberg Foundation many years ago, but I did not go into that many of the details because I thought nobody would be interested in it at all, you know. So I guess it has been, by the museum, it probably, I'm sure it has been described the way I tell it, and it's not going to be the same story every time because I do it without notes and I might forget something, or, you know. So I don't know.
Thank you.
Barbara,
We got our 6,
we've
Rabbi?
got a few more.
Okay.
Echo our thanks for the gift of being able to listen to you and to hear you tonight. And I also wanted to ask how you met Mr. Baer.
I tell you, I met him. Again, in those days, we didn't have money for the theater or anything, so we initiated a record club. People got together in somebody's house and we played classical music. We had our own concert. We had our own Carnegie Hall. And that was our entertainment, and we were perfectly happy with it. And in Washington, it was Washington Heights. And my late husband went there like all the young people, and that's how we met. In those days, really, you're married within your own community, very much so. And we were married over 50 years, with 50 or 52 good years, so it worked out finally. But the meetings were also, we went to dances, but it was always with records. It wasn't live music, but everything was very simple. To go for a hike on a Sunday with a group of young people, that was an adventure. That was a Sunday out. It was wonderful. We were teenagers and we were happy doing it. To go to a day to the beach or what have you, for a nickel you could go to Rockaway Beach. It was an outing. It was fine, and I know plenty of couples who met like that, very casually, very informally, because the young people, you know, they got together like that, and that was life, right?
Yeah, when you were in Germany, did you have non-Jewish friends, or did your
No.
parents have
No.
connections with non-Jews?
No.
Did that change?
No. My father probably through work had some connections. We went to a Jewish school and thus we're very isolated. And no, we did not have Jewish friends. The only non-Jew that I remember was a woman who cleaned for us, who was not Jewish. and we sold our chametz to her every year. Pesach time, she didn't have a clue of what was going on. And it wasn't so funny because when eventually when non-Jews weren't allowed to work for Jews anymore, where are we going to sell our chametz to, you know? And so she sort of was done on the sly that she came around and we made the deal. But things like that got to be problematic. You couldn't get Jewish help and you couldn't get non-Jewish help, and it was difficult. Things were difficult.
So I'm glad I'm going last.
Hi, yes.
Hi, Lisa. This is not a question, it's a statement.
Oh.
I know Lisa for 67 years. Now you know my age. But Lisa knows me longer than 67 years because she knows me when my mother was pregnant with me. We lived in the same building, 213 Bennett Avenue. And then we moved to the same building, 17 Fort George Hill. And I remember, and my mom, may she rest in peace, was a wonderful sewer and baker, but she used to say to me about Lisa, she has hands of gold. This woman is the most, you can see how
Wow, okay.
amazing she is. Baked and cooked and sewed and so bright. And this is gold here. I love you. I want you to know. Mwah.
Thank you, Esther. Thank you. Thank you.
Nothing to add to that other than to thank everybody, Lisa, to thank you and to tell you how much we really cherish you and how grateful we are for the opportunity to hear your story.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you. All are welcome to stay as the documents are going to be put out. And
Yeah, if anybody
thank you and good night.
wants to look at it, if anything, you're welcome to. Rabbi, you want your microphone back?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks to all who joined on Zoom.